Yes, hello, folks. Welcome to the weekly Manchester United podcast. I'm the host, as always, Phil Byrne. Joined with my regular co-host, the excellent James Rhodes. James, how you doing, mate?
I'm doing well today, and you?
Not too bad at all. Not too bad at all. It's been a nice week. Warm. What's your weather like out there in Colorado? Been warm?
Yeah, but normal now. We had that crazy heat wave come through here that's now, I think, over on the East Coast, and now it's kind of just a normal 80s summer. Pretty nice. Pretty
Yeah, it's
nice.
anything over that. Once we start getting up into the 90s, mid 90s and stuff, it's not fun. It's not
Yeah.
enjoyable.
Yep.
So it's Thursday, James. It seems like a lot has already happened since the last time we spoke.
Yeah.
Lots of things changing. And things that were true a week ago are not true today. Reading yesterday's Gyokeres is now open to moving to Manchester United. I want to talk to you about that. I want to talk to you about Casemiro. I want to talk to you about the rumored, muted potential swap with Garnacho. And I want to talk to you about that. Perhaps Jaden Sancho situation in Italy. I want to give some love to Johnny Evans, who, of course, is going to be kept on at the football club. And
Yes.
we'll talk about, of course, the fact that the never-ending because we're doing a show twice a week, it feels like we talk about it non-stop. But it does look like we're in the formality closing stages of the Bumo deal.
Yep.
And if it ended tomorrow, I'd look back and say, that's quite a swift and successful pursuit for United.
Yeah, I mean, I would tend to agree when you consider the circumstances, which is that they did already sign Cunha in the window, done, at 62.5 million. When you're ending up buying 260+ million players from other Premier League clubs, if you can do two of those before your team's back from preseason, it's pretty quick. It's not bad. Certainly compared to United, that is pretty fast. I understand that one might make comparisons to Manchester City have done this, Liverpool have done this in the window already. They've got Kirkes and they've got, Florian Wirtz and all of that kind of stuff. But one, I would say United aren't in the same position as they're in. That's just the reality we have to accept right now. And two, it should be noted, neither City nor Liverpool bought more than one player last summer. They're spending last summer's budget prior to July 1st right now. I think that goes a little bit maybe under the radar, unnoticed, these PSR turnovers, these yearly things and all of that. Yes, Liverpool and City have spent a lot of money so far, but I think Liverpool paid a few million for Chiesa, who barely played last summer, and that was their only transfer. City, I think, didn't sign anybody. I could be wrong. One person, maybe. So all this big spending that they're doing is really last summer's budget. So, we're not, when you look at the market outside of that, not many teams have done big business. If United have 120 million pounds in deals wrapped up by preseason, they're probably ahead of 99% of football clubs. That's pretty
Yeah, I
good.
mean, you look at some of the issues Newcastle have had trying to recruit.
Apparently, that's our fault.
Yeah.
Apparently, that's that's
Yeah,
United's fault, I guess.
yeah. You look at their issues.
Yeah.
You look at the fact that Arsenal still yet to secure a striker. Even if you look at Spurs and what have you, first of all, we're still at a relatively early point in the summer, and
Yeah.
I mean we've still got this Club World Cup going on, which is a nice little spectacle at the end of a season. And let me tell you, one of the things that makes it thoroughly entertaining is the South American fans. I'll be honest, the fans of our club is just sort of sad in a way, because you look at the contrast between that and what we lost. Not to go off on a non sequitur, but yeah, look, I mean, I don't know. We all know United's financial situation. And United are not in a situation they were in 5 or 6 years ago where they could buy at the top of the market. We know the situation United are in. And just one of the things that, if you look at United's failures in the past, where they've had a Champions League season, then the following season, they drop off, they finish outside the Champions League spots. And almost that second season is a better reflection of where United are at. Because, instead of trying to fix the team in one summer and not build it on solid foundations, it's better to be in my opinion, it's better to take smaller steps and put foundations in place that you can build on rather than trying to fix it all in one summer. I mean, to me, United need to go out. If you look at this, the players they're looking at, they're all in their prime, 26, 27 range.
Yeah.
And these are, to me, the players that United need to sign right now. I forget about going for the Verts and everything and trying to compete with Liverpool and City. That's not who we're competing with next season. It's the Newcastles we're competing with next season, in my opinion.
Yeah, for sure. And even, the Aston Villas and the Bournemouths and the Brentfords and the Tottenhams and all of that. And I think on that front, they're doing a good job so far on it. Presuming obviously Mbeumo gets over the line, but it is in those closing and final stages. Yesterday I was told there was nothing imminent, but that didn't mean it's like not there. It's just he's away, he's on holiday as well. There's always the technical details once you're in these what I don't know what you call these, but these like closing detail stages. The bid that went in on Monday, not rejected, not turned away out of hand or something. It's they're just when they're discussing things like the installments, small details on add-ons, you're at the end of a deal there.
Plus, when you're talking about small details in a 16 million plus deal, small details are big details. Small details are big details to you. To you and me, like it's not my money. I don't care.
Yeah.
I'd be very liberal on giving someone else's money
away.
But no, seriously, these things matter, and if you look at one of the things that's handicapped United significantly, it's bad deals that were agreed on bad terms that they can't get out of, and if we look at, I was looking at Mbumo's career, and he's been prolific, James.
Yeah.
Very close. His first season at Troyes, his second, he was obviously at Troyes reserve, scored 14 goals in 33 games, then progresses to the first team, 11 and 41, which is a healthy ratio for a winger. Then, of course, goes to Brentford, 65 and 222 games. He's got 6 goals in 22 games for Cameroon as well. To me, this is a guy that comes in, instantly improves United, and not just the goals that he scores, but the goals that he creates. To me, that is an instant 15 goal a season boost.
I think so, for sure, and in an area that is desperately needed. Yeah, and he is. There's it's kind of funny because maybe people underrated a little bit, but guys who can score 15 plus goals in the Premier League, it's not like it's that many of them. And the guys who can do that while also creating at a high level, it's not that many of them. And it is a significant upgrade on what has had there, very impactful. And I think is one of those things where you can look at it and say, yeah, it's a guy who you're directly just adding those goals to the team. And in that sense, it's a straight big improvement on what's needed, obviously, alongside having someone like Cunha. And I do think it's important in both respects that both of them are actually very good creating for others and scoring. So you're not in a situation where you're wondering like, well, who's making goals for Cunha or who's making goals for Bumo? No, they can do it for each other and for others in the team as well as getting that directness that you get from someone like Brian Mbeumo. So I'm very excited about it.
And I agree with what Patrice Evra said, James, in that instead of worrying, how do you get Ahmad and Mbeumo in the same team? Obviously, they're, Mbeumo plays on the right as well. I'm more excited about how they will both be in the same team. Because to me, one of the things that made Ahmad so special, James, is he had the ability to create something out of nothing. United weren't creating stuff from open play due to, the fact that their system wasn't producing that yet. They hadn't perfected it yet. So you needed a player who could create something from nothing. And you could see that when he got injured last season, how consequential that was. And I was looking at Bumo's goals last season, and he scores a lot of goals that he creates on his own. He scores a lot of goals, a broad variety of goals, and also he scores. He's scoring in big games. He's scoring against the top teams. I'm looking at the goals he's scoring. When he gets the ball, is there obvious danger? Is he one-on-one? Is it something you would expect a decent player to finish? And most of the time when he's getting the ball, he's got one or two defenders in front of him. and he creates something out of nothing. He's physically powerful, and you've seen Amorim talk about how important that physicality is, and this is a signing for me that isn't a Galactico signing, but a signing that will be almost as big as it. Like, whenever United signed players that weren't superstars but came in and had a Galactico impact, I think that type of player is exactly what United need. I think that he's going to come in and have a very, very successful, 4 years at United. To me, I'm quite excited about this signing.
Yeah, me too, and I agree with you in that sense. And I feel the same about Cunha. It's like they're not Galacticos, but they are the solid, very, very good, impactful players. And I'm gonna get the accusations of Liverpool fandom again. It just always happens.
You're not beating these charges, by the way.
I know, but I just maybe it's just making patterns and all of that. But I see it the same way as a lot of what they did in rebuilding their team. Mo Salah was not a Galactico signing when he was signed. Neither was Sadio Mane. Neither was guys like Bobby Firmino in the team that they had. Even now, Gravenberch and Szoboszlai and McAllister, a lot of these guys these are not Galacticos that they brought in. They were guys they felt would immediately improve them and play the way they wanted to play and provide that. They have in many instances, obviously Mo Salah became what he became, but provided that kind of immediate impact and improvement because it fit exactly what they wanted and they were very good players. And I think that's often more important in building a team than it is just to go for the big names are the cherries on top. They're the last signings you make. Once the rest is there, the 1-2 guys you get at the end to just push you completely over the edge, not while you're building it. So I would agree in that sense.
And there are also two players that really want to play for the football club that have other options. That if they wanted to pursue, Champions League, they could. If they wanted to pursue, let's be honest, probably better alternatives if you're a neutral than Manchester United. But you're making a bet on United's next 4 years, not this year.
Yeah.
And so, if you're in Bumo and you've got choice between Spurs and United, it's not just this season. It's over the next. What's the probability of the next 4 years that Spurs are going to outperform United? Not high.
Mm-hmm.
My opinion.
I agree. Yeah,
so
I agree.
It's not just this season. You're making that bet over the next 4 years. And look, to me, I'm excited. Cunha and Mbeumo walk into United's team right now, James. They're not project players. They're not players that we hope we can nurture, that can grow in and perform at that level. They're two players that will be in United's starting 11, right? No matter whether another player leaves or not at the start of the season, in my opinion. So, and this is exactly what United need, this type of proven Premier League quality that wants to be at the football club. That, if you look at Cunha, if you're playing for Brazil, you're dealing with enormous pressure.
Yeah.
So that's one international team that has similar focus and pressure that United have. So he'll know how to deal with that. So really excited about that. And of course, Mbeumo has been exceptional for Brentford in the Premier League for the last couple of seasons. So definitely encouraged. There was a story that came out shortly after we done the podcast on Monday that Casemiro was interested in Casemiro from Saudi Arabia, and it sort of disappeared off the off the information ecosystem or cycle. But there was rumors that he was close to leaving and close to agreeing a deal to go to Saudi Arabia. Do you know anything about it?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, it's always hard to know with kind of Saudi sources where coming from because we're not as familiar, right, to know who knows what, and it's kind of an interesting ecosystem where there's, rather than it necessarily being like a bunch of journalists at papers like we've got, it's a lot of like wealthy individuals who have connections to these things, who are talking. But
like
the thing that yeah, a bit like myself, very, very wealthy. I don't know that I'm measuring up to that level of wealth in connection, but yeah, but yeah, it's all in the nose, over there. Very funny. But the thing that's interesting about it is with Ronaldo signing his new contract at Al Nassr here, right? There's strong talk that he's going to have a significant say, if not control, of the signings. Now, their entire executive structure at that club is gone, is all leaving. And so there's like a new whole thing coming in, and he's got a lot of, and it can understand it. He's got a lot of control over the situation. He's the talisman for the league and for the club and all of that. And I think, you've said many times in the past that Ronaldo certainly had made some pushes for Casemiro to come join him out there.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's probably where this is coming from. And the fact of him staying, the fact of him having this kind of control, things like that, certainly leads me to believe there might be something in it, just from an outside perspective,
To me, a year ago, that would have made perfect sense because he could drop for a cup final, everything. Like it was highly, it was probable to me that he would leave. He's just turned around by his own admission and said this has been his best season. Considering everything that sort of like a Mourinho quote.
Yeah, like he was proud about this season, right? Because
it was sort of like that Mourinho finishing second quote to me. But anyway, he's been a very important player for Mourinho over the last few months, and we've seen some close to the best of Casemiro. United already need a midfielder, whether he goes or not. But to me, like this would be sort of a strange time for him to leave, considering the season that he's just had. But I think United would definitely accept a decent offer for him.
Yeah, because I think it's the financials of it. Like they're looking at midfielders now, but realistically, they're going to go affordable. There's not enough money to go like be very ambitious in that respect. So you're looking at maybe a young player to come in, compete with Casemiro, compete with Ugarte, compete with these guys in the midfield and make a space in there, or talk of somebody like Douglas Luiz or something coming back from things like that might be on the cards. If Casemiro leaves and there's an offer and there's money and there's wages coming off, they might look and say, okay, we go for a more like an Mbeumo type midfielder or Cunha, that type of guy, maybe somebody who's more refined, more ready in the Premier League. I mean, maybe not necessarily just the Premier League, but do you chase a more established midfielder who will come in and start right away in that midfield? We could speculate on the names, but because that's what you
Casemiro
would do, right?
If you're replacing Casemiro, James, you're replacing a player that is either going to be in your starting 11 most weeks or going to be on your bench. But he's an important player. So to me, like, you can't replace Casemiro with someone that is not of a similar level, or someone that if it's a young, exciting midfielder, fine. But he has to be someone that can come in and play right away. So if Casemiro goes, to me, United can't rely on, or like a Toby Collier or someone. They would have to go and recruit at a relatively decent level. Here's the thing, James, with the market this summer. It goes through a lot of different changes, because right now, if you need to sell, you have time. But that screw will start to turn soon. And there's not a lot of money out there. So there's clubs that need to sell. And as you get over, as you get closer and closer to the deadline, the clubs that need to sell will bring prices down. And this stuff matters. This is very consequential. But to me, as we said on Monday's podcast, Ineos have a huge responsibility to make sure that the first day of the season, Ruben Amorim has, maybe there's one player they haven't signed, but they have to make sure the majority of that is done. With players going out, Jaden Sancho had this. This is an interesting situation, because earlier, about 6-7 hours ago, it was reported that he was relatively close to an agreement in Italy. I know that you had done some stuff yesterday saying he was of interest to Turkish clubs, Galatasaray. And then a report came out, and I don't know how true it is, I haven't had time to check it, that his personal demands have scuppered the Juventus deal. Can you shed any light on that?
Well, yeah, and I think it's more like ongoing than closed, because even as of yesterday, I think what he was trying to do is get the Italian clubs to pay more money, to up their, there's interest from Turkey, there's interest from Fenerbahce. They tend to offer better wages in Turkey because of different tax breaks, things like that too. But and I think he's been kind of using or leveraging that to try to get more in terms of the personal terms on offer from Napoli, from Juventus in these talks. And so far, they're not really wanting to do that. And so it's creating like a gap here where they're saying, well, if we're going to pay 20, 25 million for the fee for the deal, because he's on like 15 million a year in wages, right? That's pretty significant. They're probably not going to offer more than 5 to 7, right? Over there, given the profile and all of that. So there's an 8, 10 million gap in there. And what they're looking at is, well, if we're going to pay 20, 25 to United, we're not going to cover these extra wages too, or give a big signing bonus or something like that. So if we have to pay bigger wages and the extra signing bonus, that's coming off the transfer fee, in which case, we'll pay a loan fee, and so it's basically just a financial gap of 5 to 10 million that's existed between him and Napoli, kind of in the whole thing, between the fee and the wages. It's like a 5 to 10 million gap between Napoli, Juventus, United. And that's been the situation for a bit, but the talks are kind of moving, and
what I don't understand, James, is if you're Jaden Sancho and you're holding this line, you can only do so if you're prepared to go back to United. Okay,
and you can't.
because that if you continue to demand wages that aren't commensurate with your performances, then this is inevitably got a conclusion where you're going to go back to United. And to me, the market is appraising Jaden Sancho's value based on the offers that he's being made and not the wages that he's being paid right now. I think he has a year left with an option of another year, if I'm correct in saying that, on his contract.
Yes, correct.
Okay, so he has a choice of sitting on the bench for a year and not playing, or I'm sure he thinks United will end up loaning him out again. But to me, to have salary demands, whatever you're going to get paid, you're going to make an enormous amount of money. But there has to be some self-awareness to say, look, this has not been my best couple of years. And so I can't go and demand wages that are not realistic, that no one's going to pay. You can have a great career. If someone like Juventus or Napoli comes in, I would be looking at Scott McTominay saying, if I have a Scott McTominay season a year from now, my value, I'll be able to renegotiate my contract, my purse endorsements, I could be going to a World Cup, everything. Or do you want to sit and incarcerate yourself again? Because obviously it's freedom to not be at Old Trafford, but instead he's going to have a self-imposed incarceration. I don't understand what his first principle is. What is motivating him? What is driving him? I understand it's easy for us to make claims and expectations of people when it's not our money, but that you're going to throw away your career over this because there's no one is going to pay him what United pay him, and he has to understand why.
Correct. Yeah, agreed 100%. And that really is the hang up here, is he going to at some point here recognize that? Because I don't think they're going to, they might move a little bit, but they're not going to move much on the money that's being on offer. Is he going to accept that and get the move that he wants, and get a move to a good club like Napoli or Juventus, or is he going to hang the whole thing up? And you would hope that he has enough self-awareness to say it's time to just accept it and go.
You know what I think? I think that he thinks United will get desperate and eventually agree to a loan where they subsidize his wages. So he'll end up going to a Juventus or a Napoli who will pay 90 grand, so similar to what Chelsea deal. And then a year from now, he's out of contract and he can negotiate whatever deal he wants at whatever wage level he wants. I think he feels that United will blink, agree to a subsidized loan to get him, to get the wages off the books. He will keep his wage that he's making right now. It's just going to be paid by two people, and then at the end of that particular process, walk away on a free. We will see what happens. It was rumored that Alejandro Garnacho and Christopher Nkunku, at Chelsea could be part of a swap deal. I do believe you'll see a lot more swap deals in general. And of course, we know that these are, fiddled. The numbers are, fiddled to suit both teams. But to me, there's an obvious value difference between Garnacho and Nkunku.
Yeah, and I think that there wouldn't be, definitely I don't believe United would engage in just like a straight swap of things, because it doesn't really do anything for them. And Nkunku is of interest. It was even broached a little bit in December and January, but United at that time, they don't value Nkunku anywhere near that. From his injury issues, lack of productivity in the Premier League, he's not been a solid player. There was talk of prices 600, 60 million. You're talking about like Cunha and Mbeumo type of money for a player who's not done 1/10 of what they've accomplished in the Premier League as of this point so far. And then you're talking 200,000 a week and things like that. So, I think more realistically, just be potentially some sort of sale there. And I think mostly this idea is coming um, you know, uh, from kind of the Chelsea side of like, if we want to bring Garnacho in, what can we propose? What would we potentially be able to offer that could, add to this deal, or put something together on this deal that could you know make it easier for them. But and I think there's other players that United might end up interested in, but I don't think and Kunku feels unlikely. I mean, maybe United would consider it on loan, or something as a part of sweetening the deal for Chelsea on buying Garnacho, but in that respect, I don't really see it.
Yeah, I mean, James, to me, you're talking. I think I was looking casually. I think he played 19 Premier League games last season and scored 2 or 3 goals. I can't remember. But you're talking about a guy that's essentially a Chelsea squad player. And if
Yeah.
Manchester United's, you one of their best young talents has equivalent value to a 27-year-old Chelsea squad player, then I don't understand how people can arrive at that conclusion.
Yep.
Even if I would imagine if there was some type of swap deal, it wouldn't be for zero. Chelsea would have to pay, maybe 30 million plus in Kunku or something like that. Yeah, I know you're right. It was mentioned in January because I looked at one of my old tweets about it, and it's interesting because Chelsea fans do rate him, James.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, that is not one that excites me. Johnny Evans got a new role at Manchester United, and someone that is a person that knows the club, lives and breathes the football club. His brother Corey as well is a United fan. His father's a big United fan. Johnny Evans grew up a mile apart from me. I met Johnny Evans actually in a place where we grew up called Portrush. It was the year Maguire signed for United, and I was talking to him and his lovely wife Helen, and I remember asking him about Maguire coming to United, and he couldn't have been more complimentary. So, he's someone that you want to have in your football club. And when I look at some of the roles that he's being given, do I see a future sporting director there?
Mm. Well, it is an interesting one because, obviously he's been kind of looking at, different management positions and things like that, over time, and different roles and things like that. And he's been known as somebody who helps a lot, who leads a lot, from the perspective of young players and such as well. And so this role of like looking after loans and things like that, well, these are important because you form those connections to other clubs, you form those connections to agents, to players, to people all around, all around the football atmosphere, and that's how you get into these kinds of positions, by having those connections. And a lot of times that's what's valued a lot, is the people who's the right person to call, who know the environment at other clubs, who know the right people to look into. So maybe. I mean, he's certainly somebody I could see who wants to be in that role. Very intelligent, very you know, gets the whole thing. He's been around for such a long time in so many different places and successes and things like that through the Premier League. It certainly wouldn't be a bad position for him.
By the way, I want to thank my colleague here for letting me know that I had a snatter running down my face. I don't know if I've ever mentioned this, but I have a health issue with my lung, and I'm coughing up blood clots, so
Mm.
I can't breathe properly. So I have to use this saline, and I'm getting these. They're getting what do you call that? Biopsies. And
Yeah. Yeah.
they're huge, mate. They're
Mm.
got. I, I think I might have sent you a picture of one of them before.
Yeah.
So
Gnarly stuff. Yeah. Rough
yeah,
stuff.
so I've broke my nose like 3 times, but I can't breathe anymore, and so I have to use a ceiling so I can breathe. Um, but that's whenever I turn the camera off. That's pretty much what I'm doing with the ceiling. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, with Garnacho, James, he wants to stay in the Premier League,
Yep.
and this, to me, I've always said I don't believe Chelsea's the right football club, but is it possible Newcastle get turned down on a Langa?
Mm. Yeah, I've wondered, because there's talk there. Could Newcastle turn to him? I still think about Aston Villa as the other option too. I mean, those are two clubs I think about because Aston Villa had, Rashford there for a time. But yeah, Newcastle, they're obviously looking for a forward. They're obviously looking for a Premier League forward. They looked at Mbeumo, they've looked at Cunha, they've looked at Elanga. Where do they turn after that? Garnacho could certainly be one, make sense for them in that respect that they might look to.
Rashford, I took some shit for my emotional defense of him on Monday. And look, I'm freely going to admit I am not a neutral arbiter on this particular subject, and I am someone that's a little bit emotional on that particular subject. And I probably treat Marcus with a level of sensitivity that I haven't treated other players with. I acknowledge that I still believe what I said was correct, but it's interesting why it triggers certain people. This is we were mentioning Barcelona interested on loan, even if they sign Nico Williams. Yep. Took some shit for saying he would be like to play with Lamine Yamal. I don't know why, but he did. I don't think United really want to do a loan here. I think they prefer to sell. But what do you think is going to happen with this?
I think they will accept that they'll probably have to loan him at the end of the day. And that it's still a good move for all parties involved there if that happens. I mean, obviously, United's going to start from a negotiating position of the best deal possible for them, right? Which is wages off, everything off, sale done, fully clean slate, type of thing. But obviously, there's going to be compromises in that. And if they're not prepared to bring him back into the fold, then they have to compromise. They're going to have to, because that's just a negotiating position that it is. And I think that I think a loan to Barcelona in the end will very likely be the thing that gets through at the end of the day. You get a good portion, if not all the wages covered, some kind of option put in there, and he can perform at a big club. And we've seen, obviously how that can increase and improve the value, and then the next year probably some sort of sale, and then it works out for everybody. I think that's what's going to happen at the end of the day. I think they'll have to accept that. Your microphone there.
The thing is that with Marcus Garnacho and what have you, Marcus Rashford, if Garnacho went to Aston Villa, it would irritate fans, but not in the same way it would if Marcus Rashford did. Mm-hmm. And so he's going to be held to a standard where there's only going to be one or two clubs that it wouldn't be. If he went to Arsenal, went to any top club in the Premier League, he would be hated forever. So he doesn't have a lot of choices in England that he can choose. And so you're looking at Barcelona. He would have went to Barcelona in January if they'd have been able to sell Ansu Fati.
Who's moved now?
But nonetheless, it's interesting that for someone so shit and so toxic, Barcelona are interested in him. Mr. Gyokeres. So before we came on the air, it was being reported that he would be interested in coming to Manchester United. I don't know how I get out that his preference was Arsenal. I don't know if I was his agent, I would have been really, really unhappy at that. But it doesn't shock me that he is still someone that's considered Manchester United. I was listening to Sean Dyche talk about Gyokeres, and when he was playing for Coventry and when they scouted him, and how highly he rated him then at Coventry. And he's saying about his strengths and about things that he does really, really well, and how he believes he'd be an exceptional striker for United. What do you think will happen with that?
Well, it's an interesting one because obviously the number 9 is the next priority for United. I mean, outside of raising some money, getting some sales done, things like that, is very clearly, the thing that needs to get done in the window that hasn't been addressed yet, but has been a topic for a long time. It's very much the main topic here. Ruben Amorim obviously likes him a ton and would like to bring him in because he knows he's somebody who can plug and play. Boom, we'll get you goals, and we'll get him goals in his system, and I'm sure he has full confidence in that, in doing so. There's not a better alternative that's like showing up when we're looking at all the options that are out there. You talk about other players that they're interested in, like Ekitike, who's got 100 million euros price tag for a young player, massive risk, not really in line with what they've been doing. Then you're talking about, sure, you could move to alternatives. We talked about Ollie Watkins, things like that, but there's not really been any links and such in this window to indicate that they would do it. If Gyokeres is clearly up there and he hasn't rejected United, even if Arsenal might be his choice, I kind of look at it like, I've thought about it a bit, and I thought about Lenny Yoro last summer and how they ended up getting that done. Because Lenny Yoro was waiting for Real Madrid from January, February, March, April, May, June. He was waiting for Real Madrid. And Real Madrid kept messing around with it. And what United ended up doing is going to his club, agreeing a deal, and saying, look, this is what's on the table. We've got a move for you ready. You can come to United. They rolled out the red carpet, so to speak, to say, come and join us. And they convinced him, and he joined. And it's not like it hasn't worked because of that. I mean, it's nice. It's a nice bonus when they're a United fan, like with Mbeumo and Cunha. That doesn't have to be. We've had plenty of guys who aren't United fans,
I think about that. Solskjaer was a Liverpool fan. I think about so many things like that, about players who weren't United fans, and this is important to us, but for them it's irrelevant. I couldn't care less. All right, man. I threw a tweet asking for some questions. Do you want to answer a couple of them?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. This is from Nick O. Aren't we approaching the deadline for Inos and the Glazers to either do business in July, or MUFC is once again open to the suitors, or are we going to have this lot in control for another 2 decades? So are we approaching the deadline for Ineos and the Glazers to either do? I assume what he's talking about is we're approaching the deadline where Ineos were supposed to buy out the Glazers' shares. Is this the summer? It's not this summer. Don't they the option where the Glazers can go to the market and sell those shares, or after 3 years, I think it was, Ineos had the option of buying the Glazer shares when the deal was done.
So there's a couple of things there. I think August 14th, there's an 18-month thing that ends August 14th. And what happens at that point in time is, I believe, the drag-along rights kick in at that point, which means that the Glazers could sell to somebody else if they came in for a big offer, and it would force Ineos to sell. But I do believe they also would still have like a first right of refusal for 18 months or something like that as well afterwards. But regardless, there is a bit of a point on August 14th where certain agreements that are in that initial purchase expire, and you would suggest that they would want to make some new agreements by that time. Otherwise, they're reducing, to a degree, a bit of their I guess, control over the situation from an Ineos perspective. I would still bet something happens before around that time, but yeah, there is a little bit of that, but I don't think it means that something is the case for 20 years if something doesn't happen by August 14th. It's just sticking to harsh timelines on these things is never particularly an effective way to look at it, because it's so big and complicated, this stuff. But yeah.
Got another question here from Bananas. Hey, fella, I'd like to know the difference between buying players now versus July 1st. Do we need to get stuff done before the July 1st deadline?
Uh, my understanding makes pretty much fuck all difference, part of my language on that, because when you buy players, they're already amortized by day. They're spread, their costs are spread out literally day by day. You buy someone June 30th, it's not like you're counting the whole fee on June 30th. You're counting, one out of 1,700 days on June 30th for their cost. So yeah, if you're really close, you don't want to add costs before July 1st. If you're really close to PSR, like we were last year, they were they were like within 2 million by the end of the year of violating PSR. Yeah, that can matter because you don't want to buy a player June 1st, pay a whole month. You could end up paying, that could be 1 to 2 million between wages, between things like that. But if you're not that close, it makes very little difference. Where it does make a difference is other clubs. They want to sell before July 1st because you get the whole sale right in one go. The sale happens right at once. So some clubs are trying to balance the books before July 1st. And so for them, it matters. But it's also why a lot of times things like United selling players might wait until after July 1st because clubs are not buying, they're selling before July 1st. A lot of the ones without money.
Which is a lot.
Yeah.
Finbar asks, what would you consider to be a good transfer window, and what would your minimum expectations be for our league position if we had that good transfer window? To me, United's main priority is making sure they add goals to the team, which is the front three. United need another midfielder, in my opinion. And if I wanted to be spoiled, I'd ask for a goalkeeper. I think no matter what happens this summer, Ruben Amorim has to be around the sixth place position. Barada mentioned this, in an interview, of course, with United We Stand. But to me, Ruben Amorim has to add goals to this team. He has to add entertainment, and he has to add optimism. So to me, I want to see a United team finish at the very least sixth place.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. That on that point, another goal scorer after Mbeumo, a number 9. For me, a number 9 and some kind of keeper, so that there's options at the back, would be the minimum. And if they did that, I think that's enough to be in sixth
Yeah,
or above.
I mean, James, we've mentioned this before, but if Bayern was a good goalkeeper, he'd be United's number 1 right now.
Yes.
And that's something that United need to fix. All right, let me look one or two more. Let me see here. How do you think the impact of the Club World Cup will have injury-wise on City, Chelsea? I think it will increase the likelihood of injuries where United will be rested. Most games can take advantage. Well, it's obviously not a positive for them, And then again, we've got the World Cup next summer. Like, it's just a never-ending schedule. Plus, these players will have Champions League games next season, and where United won't have any of that fixture backlog and congestion. That's real. That's really the point where when we talk about what's a successful season for Ruben Amorim, in many ways, James, he's given the perfect season for him to bed in a squad and a system where he has more time on the training ground than any other manager, that he is considered a peer at the top. This is where, to me, that Chelsea have a massive squad. City have a massive squad. They'll be all right. But outside of their 5 or 6 best players, to me, there's not a lot of difference between their squad and an average Premier League player because they're all more or less the same now anyway. To me, United have to be helped by the lack of fixture congestion. And City and Chelsea will, they'll be all right. I don't know. Will we get time for one more? Or are we done?
Yeah, we're good. If you want to do one more, we're good.
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good. Really, let me see. There's tons of them here. Some of them are repetitive. What are the top 5 must-haves in our new stadium? Well, to be honest, that's to me. I don't want to see United have a cookie cutter craft beer stadium. Like, when I look at United's history or any football club with United's type of history, their stadium matters. Anfield matters. The atmosphere matters. One of the things that I've loved about the Club World Cup is when I look at the passion of the South American fans, they bring soul. They bring something greater than just a paying customer. And football is lost. Like it adds so much to the spectacle when you see, these Boca Junior fans, these River Plate fans, these fans, Palmeiras, Flamengo. That's, for me, the heart of football beats in South America anyway. But to me, you can't sanitize the Premier League experience anymore. It has to have soul and not just about monetization.
Yeah, I would say from a literal sense, I'd like to see the fans close to the pitch because I think that matters a lot. I'd like to see that there's no 6-foot drop off on the pitch too, because I think that's definitely something that needs to
I don't
go.
know how that's continued United. I don't
I
know
have
how
no
that hasn't
idea how
been
that
made.
exists. It's like it's so bad. Some of the injuries and things that have happened have just been down to that, um, and then
It
I would
wasn't awful
say
to see Di Maria fly down it, mind
no,
you.
that
But
was okay. Once in a while it's good, but you could just toss them right into the fans anyway. Um, no, when it's good, it's good, but when it's bad, it's not great. We saw a couple injuries in the last few years on that, but no drop off the pitch close to the fans, and obviously not shit like you get with these obstructed
edible food,
things, and then food. I mean,
edible
you gotta
food,
have
and
good food
don't
at
have
at,
rats in
at a
there would be
stadium
nice.
these days,
Toilets
man.
at
You gotta
work
have
would be
good.
nice. Roofs that don't
Yeah.
leak would be nice. No.
Yeah, some protection from the elements for the fans would
Yeah.
be a big one to me as well. I think it's important for the experience as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to keep. I just, if you look at the Dallas Cowboys Stadium, like,
Yeah.
unbelievable, right? Truly futuristic, unbelievable. But everything's monetized.
Mm,
You can't tailgate at the Dallas Cowboys Stadium. You
yeah,
have to get a
yeah,
training because Jerry Jones made sure that you're buying
uh-huh,
his shit if you want to
yeah,
tailgate
yeah.
and not
Oh,
yours. And everything, is just being monetized. And to me, you just lose something with that. Like, you look at South America, never lost, and that to me is something that football needs to be conscious of and make sure that it's not just about how much.
I think it
Okay.
would be pretty cool, by the way, just as an aside on that, to have like official outdoor locations where fans can gather to watch games. You know
Mhm.
what I mean? That are not monetized. Like they might have food and drinks and stuff nearby, but like places you can just go, like tailgating in a parking lot and having a big screen up. You know what I mean? Like something like that for
Yeah.
people who aren't inside to have that atmosphere outside, I think would be pretty cool. I don't know how feasible that is, but stuff like that I think would be really cool. I mean, you see it like in the US, we do
I
that
was
with
just
the
going to say the
yeah,
Americans
in
do
like the
it really,
playoffs
really
and
well.
hockey, things like that. They at the away, even when there's a home game for the other team, at the in both instances they'll have events, where you can go outside and it's huge crowds and it makes for such a great atmosphere to watch things like a concert atmosphere, for away games or for people who aren't in the stadium. I think that is really beneficial to the whole feeling and the whole city and the connectedness of everybody. I think stuff like that would matter.
You know what's being asked a question here, which from Varun Segal, which does have some real interest to me. Can you talk about midfield targets, please? When we're talking about forwards and we're talking about other potential players at United,
Mm.
there's 3 or 4 names that repeat. Why do we? I don't see that with midfielders. Like, what are there's no consistent speculation to me linking United to a midfielder where I feel like something's close. Who would be the midfield targets?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I think part of the reason for that is because it's just not the same level of priority, right? Because of what you have, but also because I know people don't like to hear this a little bit, and I've said it many times that Ruben Amorim's setup, given the way that it is the midfield has a bit less impact than it might in other setups and things like that. It's just a two-man midfield. Bruno is very likely to be playing in it. So you've already got one top player playing in there. You have Ugarte, Casemiro, Collier, Kabi Mainu all competing in these positions. It's not that you don't necessarily need one because you want the flexibility to move Bruno up front, to move Kabi up front, to do these types of things. But it's just, I don't think that the feeling is that, hey, it's going to be, this thing is going to elevate United to a whole nother level. I think if they, if they moved Casemiro and they had a lot of money left over after addressing the forwards, then you'd hear something more like they go for a big player, a big young player or somebody who could be the long-term like anchor for the whole midfield. But without that, you don't want to go spend a bunch of money on players who are maybe not the long-term guy. So if you're looking at names, I mean, we had a lot of links to Ederson, for example, for a while there, and that was probably the main one. But it's 60 million, to do a deal like that right now. They just don't have the money to do that this summer in that position with the other things that are being addressed and the goals being addressed. And I think this is one of those points of like taking the small steps forward properly, like address the goals and then, build it up correctly. Casemiro's out of contract next summer. It's probably a better time if you're going to go spend a lot of money is next summer in the midfield and make that your number one priority. I think that's the main reason from my perspective.
Yeah, I mean, look, to me, if you give Ruben Amorim a blank check, he's bringing in. This is not his perfect midfield. He would bring other players in, but then, James, to me, these are such key fundamental positions that you don't just sign a midfielder if you can afford one. If you only sign one if you really need one. If you really need one, then to me, we have to balance expectation with reality. If we can't sign the players we really need, then the football club have to be upfront about that and say, look, this is not a perfect world. This is going to slow down the speed of our rebuild, and we'll get there eventually. But that's a key position, James. That's you can maybe get away with not signing a left back or not signing a right back, but if you need a midfielder, you have to sign a midfielder. And United were a bit short in there as it was. Eriksen's now gone. And to me, still a big question mark over Kobbie Mainoo and where he plays in this team. Can you think of any obvious players other than Collier that's coming up from the academy? And Collier's going to be turning 22, so you can't call him an academy player anymore, but any players out of the academy that are ready to step up into that position?
Well, it's interesting because, like, for example, you take Kone, who's one of the young players that they've brought in, but it's more likely he goes on loan. And this is part of the question of it, because I think he's rated extremely highly, but they want to get him into a first-team environment that's not United to be more ready. But I think this is part of the question in terms of balancing, the financials of it. I think that there's not necessarily a clear academy player coming through that's ready for that position besides him in that role. And this is where it's like this is the complication of it, because it's important. But I think you sign one this summer and you sign one next summer, and I think this summer it's more likely to be an affordable young player, and then next summer you have Kone. You see how Kobbie's done through the year. You get another player in this year, and you can make that assessment. Do we need to go spend 80 million on someone big, like Chelsea got Caicedo and Enzo and these players? Do you go for Balaba? Do you go for Adam Wharton? Do you go for one of these big players who's kind of coming up in the Premier League, but it's going to cost a lot, that you can't do now, that you're sure next summer is your long-term solution? Because I think that's important too, right? Don't just buy somebody for the sake of it, but buy somebody that's going to fit, or buy somebody that's semi-low risk, that you can still buy again later if you need to.
Yeah, no, you buy someone that if you ask me what my team's going to look like in 2 years, that player is in it.
Yeah, that's right? Ideally what you get.
Yeah, it's not someone that you're just buying because you have an immediate need and they fill a need, but they don't have a high potential that can be realized. Because there's no point with that unless you're signing a 33, 34-year-old where they're just there for the purpose of filling a gap. But I don't think United can afford to do that given the pace of the Premier League, given the fact that United need more legs in midfield. And, obviously one of the things Vavel's going to have to do is get the likes of Baleba before they go to a Brighton. And then, because that's something United need to do much, much better on. So I still think that if they sell Casemiro, James, they can't go with the young midfielder.
Yeah, 100%. I agree in that.
Yeah, that is something that can only United should sell him. If you can sell him and you can get an Ederson where net cost to you is about 30 million after you get rid of Casemiro, everything else, that to me is a deal that could be completely transformative for United. I want to ask you two questions, James, quickly before we
Yeah.
go. Do we know anything where Martinez and De Ligt are at with their recovery and have any potential return dates? Or where is De Ligt going to be part of United's preseason, July 7th? Is he ready? And do we know how far Martinez is off?
That's an interesting question. I haven't heard a thing about De Ligt. My assumption was that it wasn't so major, like that he might have. Right, because my assumption is De Ligt is okay because we haven't heard anything else, and I hope he's ready in time. But I can't say that for sure because
Well,
I
because
I
when he
don't
got
remember.
injured, Amorim,
Yeah,
they were saying they're more worried about him being ready for next season because it was
yeah.
obviously a decent injury. He didn't play any of the last couple of games, so I was
For
just curious.
some reason, I feel like I heard that it wasn't going to be that bad, and that he almost could have even pushed it to be back in the squad for the final, but it would have been risky. So I'm assuming he's okay as of the last thing I heard. In terms of Lissandro, I know that he'll be back on like individual running over the summer. That's the plan. But with a serious injury like that, like if you're coming back from a small muscle injury, you're running and then you're back in the team 2 weeks
Mhm.
later. When you're coming back from like an ACL, MCL type of injury, you're running, it could be 3-4 months before you're actually ready to play in a match. Um, I think the goal is before the end of the calendar year that Lissandro's back fully with the team. It could be sooner than that.
Seriously, like the end of the calendar year. So you're talking
Yeah,
December?
yeah, because I think that he'll be running on grass July, August. It's like because you're talking about match like Premier League ready. You know what I
Mm,
mean? It's the level is like very, maybe he'll
Jesus.
be sooner, but yeah,
I,
that's kind of the thinking.
at some point, there's going to be a tipping point where Martinez, where these injuries are just going to have a massive
Yeah, that's the
impact on
worry.
him
Yeah,
as a player, and I'm just hoping this is the last major injury that we.
yeah,
This is the third major injury Martinez has had at United. It's sad because outside of Fernandez, he was one of the best signings United made. He's transformative, and I think that he would be United legend status if he hadn't had these injuries. And you can draw a
yeah,
direct causal line between his injuries and a significant drop in form. I mean, United away to City and away to Liverpool this season, he was key in both of those games in that
yep,
defensive midfield creative role. I think that he's someone I would love to have back. All right, man, we'll go ahead and leave it there. Thanks to all of you for downloading the pod as usual. I hope you all have a wonderful, safe weekend. I hope your mental health as well, your physical health as well. I hope all of you are good. Thanks for supporting the podcast. Thank you for all your kind messages, tweets, and for asking us questions. We'll get this in a bit more coordinated as we move forward. But thanks to all of you. Jamesy, all the best, man. Have a great weekend.
yes, you too. See you later,
Much
everyone.
love, mate. See ya. Take care. Bye.